Welcome, folks. Typically speaking, it takes us about 5 minutes for everyone to marshal. I've gone ahead and put the link in the chat, so if folks could please go add themselves to that would be fantastic.
Hey, Ed, can you check the PMs real quick?
Sure, 1 second. For those just joining, there's the link. If you could please add yourself to the, if you could please go ahead and add yourself to the attendee list, that would be fantastic. All right, so we're about 5 after. Is there anyone who can go ahead and share the agenda? Okay, let me go ahead and share then. Awesome. So if you please go ahead and add yourself to the attendee list with the link that's in the chat. The agenda is sort of the normal one. So we'll walk through events, announcements, social media, and then get to the meat of the agenda. As always, if you have an agenda item that you would like to add, please feel free to add it at the end. Or add it anywhere in the agenda, frankly. We're pretty open about people just sticking their agenda items in, and we generally get to them. Cool, so recurring events, in addition to this meeting and the one that comes just before it, where we do issue and PR reviews, we also have the CNCF Telecom Users Group. Their next call is coming up on Monday, July 6th. And CNCF SIG Network, which is on the first and third Thursday of every month at 11 a.m. And there's a link to their public Google Calendar there. And we do participate as a community in both of those. We're currently trying to get more information on the KubeCon stuff for the virtual bit. We will let you guys know as soon as we have actually sorted that piece out, but we do still intend to do a virtual a virtual KubeCon, or a future virtual NSMCon at KubeCon, definitely. Then we also have coming up a virtual Open Networking Summit North America in September. We do have coming up in November the KubeCon plus Cloud Native North America in Boston, Massachusetts. That CFP is closing on this Friday, at least last time I checked. I don't know if anyone has checked recently. It has been moving out. I would strongly encourage folks to get that network service mesh related talks in. Any other events that we need to discuss? Okay then, moving on to announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? All right, cool. Then to social media. We are currently at 777 followers, up 3 from last week. We're following 2313 folks, up 3 from last week. And we have nearly 1,400 tweets, up 25 since last week. The things that have been posted have included call reminders, pointers to the weekly CNCF webinar, event information about OSS has been tweeted out. This is probably not the year for it, but I will say OSS has historically been a really fun event in person. I imagine it'll also probably be pretty good virtually. We've got training that was tweeted out, the Linux Foundation's training. Then general stuff from VMware's open source on GitHub repository hygiene. Telecom TV, some bits on cloud native and automation, why cloud native is important. And the CNCF technology radar, which looked kind of interesting when I glanced through it. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that. LinkedIn, we've mirrored the same content to LinkedIn, and we're at 165 followers there, +1. So it looks like Twitter is probably, we're probably more of a Twitter-oriented community here than not, than LinkedIn-oriented, but that's fine. It's good to maintain all those channels. And then, plans for next week include retweets, contributor podcasts, blogs, and events, any pending information we get on NSMCon EU to promote registrations, etc. So, anything else on social media before we dive into the agenda? Cool. So we talked last week a lot about repo pipelining, and in particular, trying to figure out what to name the next set of repos that we're looking at doing. And I think we sort of sorted out some of this and decided we'd start with the integration with Kind, get some of the command pieces worked out, and so forth. Towards that end, we do have a command registry memory repo. This is essentially a repo for putting a purely memory-backed NSM registry command in place. There are lots of places where this is just super handy, but that repo has come up. And then we have the integration K8's Kind repo for basically providing any integration stuff with K8's Kind. I think this is mostly going to consist of materials that involve starting the system up in Kind and then running the sort of central integration tests against it. We've got a number of exciting things that are in the process of landing as well. So out for review right now is the initial memory-backed registry, the initial network service manager, and we're really close to having the command forwarder VVP agent land. I've been busily writing tests for that to test to make sure that the various combinations of mechanisms not only come up, the configurations are right, the pings all pass, that kind of stuff. I've also been looking there at trying to move to true v3 payloads. In the past with the mono repo, even when your payload was IP, we were sort of passing your Ethernet frame across. Going forward, if the payload is IP, the idea would be that the only guarantee you have is that the IP packet you give us goes across the V-wire. We don't necessarily guarantee the Ethernet frame. If you need an Ethernet thing, ask for an Ethernet thing. Does that make sense to folks? Yeah, the other thing that I'm super happy about with the forwarder is it actually does the correct stuff now for /32s and /128s. So you'll be able to do /32 IPAM across a vWire, which is exciting. Anything else for today's agenda? Are you guys able to unmute?
Yeah, if nothing more from guys, probably we could again check with a schema of for
Check with whom?
will work with a new version.
I didn't quite, new version of what?
New version of a process, how new forwarder endpoint cross-connect NEC will work. As I remember, you have some diagram
Sure.
of entire process.
Yeah, give me 1 second to go and find that.
Because we almost near to having all of this process working.
Yep, let me go find that. Things have evolved a little bit because we've learned as we've implemented it. Let me see if I can find. Google Drive is being a bit slow today. I found one of them. Okay. Great, let me go ahead and share those. So the first one we talked about was moving the NSM forwarder to a cross-connect NSC. So from what's going on in the mono repo where we have these separate APIs for cross-connect and forwarder registration, to a situation where we just have the network service mesh in the registry, and the network service client sends its request to the network service manager, which will essentially interpose a forwarder, something implementing the cross-connect network service. It'll receive the request, it'll send a request back to the network service manager, which now that there's a forwarder in the chain, we'll go ahead and send it off to the network service endpoint, wherever the terminal network service endpoint is. The connection comes back to the network service manager, gets forwarded to the forwarder, which can then build the cross-connect, then gets returned to the network service manager that can return it to the client. And the net result of this is that we can sort of round robin across forwarders till we find one where we can actually succeed at this. If you've got forwarders that support, for example, different mechanisms and whatnot. And also ends up being sort of simpler from an API point of view. It should simplify healing, and we've got the document as well on healing. And then there's actually a whole activity diagram that talks through the process as well. Let me go ahead and stick a link to this into the meeting minutes. Is there something that folks would like to deep dive into, particularly on the forwarder piece?
I think we already in state when we have NS manager almost ready in pull request. We have forwarder.
Yep.
have some test NSEs, and probably we will in near few days we'll have initial client as a application. So we're mostly ready to start working in this schema instead of a previous monorepo approach.
Nope, I think we're very close there. I do want to reiterate that we're in the market for a better word for the ICMP responder than a better name for the ICMP responder than ICMP responder. So if anyone has any smart ideas there, we would very much like to hear them. Was this what you had in mind when you were asking about sort of the picture of where we're going?
Yep.
Cool.
Ping server, what about that then, Ed?
I'm sorry, what?
Ping server, what about that?
Which server?
A ping server.
Oh, ping server.
Instead of ICMP responder. I mean, what?
Well, ping is we could just call it simply, yeah, we simply could just call it the ping NSE. And I think more people know what ping
I was
is.
joking. I was joking. I mean,
Well, you were joking, but I think it's marginally better. And that almost everyone knows what ping is, but it's actually remarkable how few people realize that that's ICMP under it when you move away from networking people.
So in reality, we do serve pongs and not pings. So pong server.
So if we go with Pong, I feel like we need a mascot for it.
Can I ask something regarding this new sequence diagram?
Mm-hmm.
So my understanding is right now we support like the typical forwarders that we have, like VPP and kernel forwarders, and also we can introduce new forwarders to network service endpoints. Is this right?
Yeah, in fact, part of this change was motivated by making it easier to introduce new forwarders.
Okay, but how do we decide where we should include our new forwarder? If it should be like a generic one, or we should just introduce it through an NSE?
So a forwarder is providing a very specific service, which is it's providing cross connect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't see the difference with the NSE that actually provides a new mechanism that needs cross connects.
So a cross connect is literally just providing a virtual wire. A network service endpoint may be doing something like routing for you across a VRF, or doing load balancing for you, or any number of other things. Does that make sense?
Yes, but why should, okay, yeah, but this is just a service. Load balancer is a service, it's not a forwarder or something, right?
But a load balancer is a network service.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, probably a forwarder. So old name, new name is like a cross connect network service. Should be better.
So you're a little bit newer to the community. I think is Dimitrios the correct pronunciation of your name?
Yes, that's correct.
So you're a little bit newer to the community, so you may not remember the last time we had to rename the forwarder. Because it turns out we're atrocious at naming that particular component in the system, like really bad.
Wait, because I think I'm confused. So right now the forwarder is like cross connect network service endpoint. It's like this is the only difference that we have with the old code.
There are some others around healing that fall out of that, healing and paths as well.
Uh-huh.
And the entire architecture is actually quite a bit simpler. The healing ends up being massively simpler. And I can drop, let me go ahead and grab the link here and drop it in from this. Just so that there's a bit of reference. So effectively, the code itself is quite a bit cleaner. We've incorporated a lot of stuff that we've learned. We've got the healing 2.0 that we've done as part of this as well, because we sort of needed it, because it turns out that the way we were healing didn't actually scale to a world where you had multiple forwarders. And so we've done that. And the nice thing about Healing 2.0 is it should actually allow much more recovery in the system, in the sense that the healing we had before, you could lose an element and we would recover. With the Healing 2.0, we think you could lose pretty much everything but the client. And we can still recover when things restart. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally. Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean,
also,
also,
if you if we lose a client, we no need to heal. So
no, I'm 100% with you. Like if you've lost a client, I'm not sure why you would need to heal. You've got other deeper problems if you lose the client.
But another question here, and if I have 3 forwarders, say that we have EPP, we have kernel, and we have SRV forwarder, which will be selected, and how is that election going?
Yeah, so basically the real question is, in what order will we try them?
Yeah.
Right, because in practice, we will try all of them if we have to get something that works. Now, in terms of which order that they should come in, we've sort of muttered a little bit under our breath and said, well, we'll round robin across them, and I guess we'll go with whoever registers first. But the truth of the matter is that there's always felt like there's a more sophisticated approach that could be taken with that, especially since the forwarders are registering as cross connects, right? So they're coming in and they're registering as a network service, which means, of course, you could attach labels to them, right? And so we sort of feel like there should be something smart we can do that looks sort of like what we do for network services around matches. It just hasn't been fully fleshed out yet. In part because, quite frankly, we can start with just a round robining by the order in which you registered to get going. And then we can have a much more sophisticated discussion as we garner experience about how to handle the order in a way that's smarter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's also like I can see that, like an SRV might be that we can say every virtual wire is expensive, but it's high performant if you need that. And then you can have like users that just need bulk transport. I mean, and then you would like to be able to differentiate those and not just get like some really slow guy gets all the SRV links. It's not fun.
Yeah, and again, like part of how, that's absolutely true. And those are some of the interesting questions. And so what we've endeavored to do is to build a system where we can explore those answers fairly easily. Yep. So for example, if you go look at the way that we've handled just regular old NSE selection, it's broken into two chain elements. One of them is discover, which is the piece that goes out and talks to the registry protocol and produces a list of candidates.
That's where all the services are,
yes. And the second is round robin, right? And round robin just goes through and round robins among the candidates for the moment to select among them. And we realize that's a little bit naive too. People have talked about wanting to explore other solutions, but by getting those into discrete chain elements, it provides a lot of space for people to play and explore and sort of see what they can do. And we'd like to do the same thing around forwarder selection as well. So, cool. But no, you raised a good point, and it's an interesting question. And the real thing is, like, how do you figure out a way to do that in a manner that's elegant? Right, because you know as well as I do, the way networking has traditionally done this is to give you an infinite set of inelegant nerd knobs. And I feel like there's an elegant way to go about that.
Yeah, but I also think elegance is like different for different people. I mean, some people think it's elegant to do as little as possible. Some people think it's elegant with an architecture that allows you to grow. So it's very different. I mean,
well, I in my own mind, I tend to separate the scope of the architecture from the. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Elegance is to a certain degree an aesthetic judgment.
Yeah.
I tend to feel about it that it's somewhat independent of. It's somewhat independent of the sort of scope of problems you can solve with the architecture. Although I take that back, because elegant architectures tend to be able to solve more problems.
Yeah, it's elegant with file descriptor. The Unix file descriptor abstraction is elegant, but it's very old. But it's a nice abstraction, I think.
Yeah. No. I get it. So I mean, it's. I guess I'm trying to sort of cast about for some of my own judgment of what elegance means, and this is personal to me. It's not the end all and be all. But to a certain extent, I always tend to think of an architecture as elegant if it imposes, if it allows you to solve, if it does not impose strong additional costs as you solve to simple problems in order to solve complicated problems, right? So that's a characteristic of an elegant system. The other one gets back to sort of like my statement about architecture, which is, you've probably heard me say before about architecture that, any moron can meet his requirements. The sign of a good architecture is that it allows you to solve problems. It allows you to meet requirements you didn't realize were requirements yet, either within the architecture or with a very simple extension of it. And so like introducing, there's one way to address a problem, which is every time you get a new use case, you put a new nerd knob for the use case. And that strikes me as very inelegant. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm mostly just an artist. Cool. Anything else on this or anything else before we conclude for today?
Oh, I have one small question related to forwarder. Mostly it's related to your PR. As I see, current forwarder implementation is a missing part of registration in registry. Do you plan to add something to?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm definitely going to add the registration bits there. It's just they were in motion. And from the forwarder's point of view, registration is really simple, right? And so it was not going to be a huge deal for the forwarder to register itself.
Oh, yep. Also, what is query an SM manager should send to the registry to find all cross-connect NCs?
Yeah, so I mean, my thought had been, if you're the network service manager, would you do something very similar to what we do for local bypass, which is to simply note that someone has registered locally as a forwarder. That had been my initial thought. There may be more elegant ways to go about it. Among other things that we built chain elements for would be things that add pod and node information as labels to a registration. So that may also be a way to go about it, because in the system.
And then this forward NC, it will not be an addressable service as the same as a normal NC, will it? Or would it be possible for a client to try to connect to a cross-connect service?
Yeah, so my initial thought is very similar to yours, which is you probably don't want to register them publicly in the broad.
You can maybe. Yeah.
But there might be something interesting involved in doing so. It's possible. I'll give you a good example of that sometimes comes up. You'll sometimes talk to people who are doing VPN things where they've got to go give an IP address to their VPN peer, right? And so you could occasionally find yourself in weird corners of that, potentially. But I would think, generally speaking, my tendency would be just to note them locally and not forward their registration up. But we can sort of experiment and see what actually makes sense. My primary concern is just making sure that we localize the problem of what to do there, so that we don't wind up in a situation where we wind up with like the outcome of that decision scattered across a bunch of code all throughout the system. So, anything else? All right, I will see you guys next week.
Yeah, bye-bye.